All right, let's dive in. Today we're looking at a bike making some noise, the QJ Motor SRK 800RR. You sent us that review, and well, we wanted to get into some of the details with you. To help break it all down, I've got an expert here with me who knows a thing or two about sport bikes. So the first thing that stood out to me in this review was the engine. 799cc, parallel twin, 94 horsepower. What's that like in the real world?
Oh yeah, this engine's a real standout for this bike. Gives you that punch you want without being too crazy. It's not a leader bike or anything, but you're definitely going to feel it when you twist the throttle.
So it's got that sporty feel, but it's not going to scare you off. But the review also talked about all the tech they packed into it. Adjustable suspension, traction control, even different riding modes. Do all these features make it easier to handle?
Yeah, for sure. Those rider aids really change how the bike feels.
Okay.
Like with the traction control, you can actually adjust how much it kicks in. So if you're just starting out, you can keep it on high, and it'll help keep you safe. And as you get more comfortable, you can dial it back. And then the adjustable suspension, well, that's huge. It's like having different shoes for different occasions. You can set it up for a sporty ride or make it more comfortable for cruising around town.
So it's adaptable. That's cool. Now, you can't talk about a new motorcycle without comparing it to the competition, right? The review had a chart comparing the SRK 800RR to some other bikes in its class. The Kawasaki Z800, the Yamaha MT-09, even the Ducati Monster 821. When you see those names, what comes to mind?
Well, those are all solid bikes, no doubt. They got a bit more horsepower than the SRK 800RR, I'll give them that. But the thing is, the QJ comes in at a much lower price, almost $9,500. So you got to ask yourself, how much are those extra few horses really worth?
It's almost like QJ's trying to shake things up a bit, coming in with a really competitive price. Maybe they're trying to disrupt the market a little.
Could be. And that lower price might be even more attractive, considering QJ's a relatively new brand in some areas.
Yeah, that's true. The review mentioned that, and it made me wonder about things like dealerships and parts. If they're not as established, is that going to be a problem?
It's a valid concern, for sure. You might have to travel a bit further to find a dealer or wait a little longer for parts.
It's definitely something to consider. But the review did say that QJ Motor is part of a much larger motorcycle group in China.
Right, and that could actually work in their favor.
Yeah.
Being part of a bigger group usually means they have more resources, better supply chains. It could lead to more competitive pricing and even easier access to parts down the road.
So it might be a bit of a wait-and-see situation, but not necessarily a deal breaker. Before we move on, the review's conclusion was that this bike offers a good balance of performance, comfort, and affordability. They said it could be a good choice for a wide range of riders, from experienced folks to people just getting started. What are your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, from what we've talked about so far, it sounds like they're onto something.
Yeah.
But to really get a feel for it, we need to dive into the riding experience itself.
And that's exactly where we're headed next. Let's shift gears and see what it's like to actually ride this machine. All right, so we've talked about the engine, the tech, the price, even touched on what it might be like to own a QJ motor, being a newer brand and all. But let's get to the fun part. What's this thing actually like to ride?
Well, the review jumps right into that, and one of the first things they mention is the styling. They call it aggressive, which is pretty common for sport bikes these days.
Yeah, I saw that in the pictures too. Lots of sharp lines and angles. But does that actually affect how the bike rides?
It can, actually. Those short lines aren't just for looks, they're about aerodynamics. They help the bike cut through the air better, which can make it more stable at higher speeds.
So it's not just about looking cool, it's functional too. But a bike can look as fast as it wants. If it's not comfortable to ride, it's not going to be much fun. What did the review say about the ergonomics?
They actually highlighted the comfortable riding position. They talked about the upright seating, the adjustable foot pegs, the wide handlebars. It sounds like they put a lot of thought into making it comfortable for a variety of riders.
That's important, especially if you're going to be spending any serious time in the saddle. You don't want to be cramped up or fighting the bike just to get comfortable.
Right. And they specifically mentioned the seat being well padded, which is always a plus for longer rides.
So far, it sounds like this bike has it all: powerful engine, advanced electronics, comfortable ergonomics, a design that's both stylish and functional. But what about the overall feel? That intangible something that makes a bike more than just the sum of its parts.
Well, that's where the subjective side of things comes in. And from what I gathered, the reviewer described the SRK 800RR as feeling agile and responsive. They said the handling was precise and inspired confidence.
And what about the engine? Did they mention how it delivered its power?
Yeah, they said it was smooth and predictable, which is a good thing.
It sounds like a great combo for someone who wants a bike that's fun and engaging, but not too demanding. It goes back to what we talked about earlier about QJ Motor aiming for that sweet spot of accessible performance.
Exactly. They're not trying to build the most extreme sport bike out there. They want to offer a taste of that performance without making it intimidating for riders who are new to this category.
Makes sense. So we've talked about the bike itself, but this whole conversation has got me thinking about the bigger picture. What does the arrival of a bike like the SRK 800RR from a newer company like QJ Motor mean for the industry as a whole?
It's an interesting question for sure. I mean, for a long time, the motorcycle market has been dominated by a few big names. But now you have companies like QJ Motor coming in and offering competitive bikes at attractive prices.
And that's got to shake things up a bit, right?
It definitely does.
Yeah.
It forces the established brands to step up their game.
More competition is usually a good thing for consumers. It leads to better products and hopefully better prices.
Right. And it gives riders more options to choose from, which is never a bad thing.
It's like they say a rising tide lifts all boats. So for riders who are looking for a great bike without breaking the bank, it's a pretty exciting time to be shopping around. What do you think this means for the future of the motorcycle industry? Do you think we'll see more companies like QJ Motor emerging and challenging the status quo?
I think it's a trend that's here to stay. The industry is changing, and these newer manufacturers are bringing a fresh perspective. And as technology keeps advancing, I think we're only going to see more innovation coming from these unexpected places.
It's not just about this one bike, it's about a potential shift in the entire industry. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive into the QJ Motor SRK 800RR has been really interesting. From the bike's features and performance to its potential impact on the industry, there's a lot to think about. But before we wrap up, there's one more thing we need to talk about. Let's get into what the critics are saying about the QJ Motor SRK 800RR. Okay, so the review you sent us had a section with feedback from other reviewers, people who actually got to ride the SRK 800RR. What are they saying about it?
It seems like the early reviews are pretty positive. A lot of them really liked how the engine performed. They said it was smooth and responsive, especially for a parallel twin.
So no complaints about it being jerky or anything. That's good to hear. A rough engine can really take away from the fun.
Yeah, for sure. And that smooth power delivery makes it even more approachable for riders who aren't used to powerful sport bikes.
What about the handling? Did the reviewers think it lived up to the hype?
Oh yeah, definitely. One reviewer even said the handling reminded them of some of the more expensive sport bikes. They said it felt really planted and stable in the corners.
That's great to hear. So QJ Motor wasn't just talking a big game, they actually backed it up with performance. But this whole conversation about QJ Motor has got me thinking about the bigger picture. What does a bike like this from a newer company mean for the motorcycle industry as a whole?
Well, it's definitely shaking things up a bit. For a long time, the market was dominated by just a handful of brands. But now you have companies like QJ Motor coming in, offering competitive bikes at really good prices. It's giving riders more options.
And that's got to put some pressure on the bigger, more established brands, right?
Absolutely. It forces them to innovate, to come up with better bikes, and maybe even adjust their prices.
In the end, it's the riders who benefit the most.
Exactly. More competition almost always leads to better products and better value for the customer.
I like how you put that better value for the customer. What do you think all this means for the future of the motorcycle world? Will we see more companies like QJ Motor popping up and challenging the old guard?
I think so, yeah. The industry is evolving, and these newer brands are a big part of that. They're bringing fresh ideas and a real drive to make a name for themselves. And with technology constantly changing, I think we're going to see a lot more innovation coming from these unexpected places.
It's not just about one bike. It's about a shift in the whole industry. Pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time to be following the motorcycle world.
This deep dive into the QJ Motor SRK 800RR has been great. We've learned a lot about the bike itself, but also about what it represents for the industry as a whole. But before we wrap up, any final thoughts for someone who's seriously considering buying one of these bikes?
I think the most important thing is to keep an open mind. Don't be afraid to look beyond the big names and explore what these newer manufacturers are doing. Do your research, read the reviews, and if you can go for a test ride. There's no better way to know if a bike is right for you than actually riding it.
Great advice. I think we can all agree on that. Well, thanks for joining me today and sharing your expertise. I really appreciate it. And for you listening out there, we hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about. Maybe it's even inspired you to go out and check out the QJ Motor SRK 800RR for yourself. Until next time, happy riding, everyone.